Straight to Glasgow, where Nicola Sturgeon is just arriving at a rally where she's due to speech. Let's listen in.
Thanks, David.
Nicola, do you want David Cameron to be Prime Minister?
No, I don't. I've spent my entire life campaigning against Tory governments, and I've said that if there are more SNP and Labour MPs than there are Tory MPs, then we'll vote to stop a Tory government even getting off the ground. And I reissue my challenge to Ed Miliband today to say likewise. This story is 100% untrue. I've said that. The French ambassador, who was the other person in the conversation, has said that. That really should be an end to the matter. And in my view, the bigger question, and one that I am raising today with the head of the civil service, Jeremy Haywood, is who wrote this memo, since the Foreign Office now appear to be denying all knowledge of it? How did it come to contain such an inaccuracy? And how did it get into the hands of the Tory supporting Daily Telegraph? I want an inquiry into this, and that's what I've asked Sir Jeremy Haywood to undertake.
What are your recollections, therefore, of that conversation you had with the French ambassador?
The conversation with the French ambassador was a general conversation about the political situation. At no point, and this is not just me saying this, the French ambassador is saying this, did I state a preference for a Tory Prime Minister. Anybody who knows me knows that is absolutely preposterous. I've spent my entire life campaigning against Tory governments. So, my message to Ed Miliband...
So how could you have misread what you said, or is it just completely untrue?
Well, she's saying that I didn't say it. So it strikes me you've got a situation here where you've got two people having a conversation and they both say this is not true. Now, I think that really should be an end to the matter. And the bigger story here, the bigger question, is how a memo containing such an inaccuracy comes to be written by a UK civil servant who wasn't at the meeting, and then how such a memo gets into the hands of the Daily Telegraph. That's the story here. These are the questions that need to be answered, and that's why I've written to Jeremy Haywood asking for those questions to be answered.
So were the names David Cameron and Ed Miliband mentioned at all during your conversation with the French ambassador?
Look, what the Daily Telegraph are reporting is untrue. I've said that, and the French ambassador has said that. We were the two people having the conversation. So, anybody who knows anything about me knows that I don't want to see a Tory government. I'm campaigning to get the Tories out of Downing Street. The SNP's making very clear that we'll lock David Cameron out of Downing Street. The only person who's not made that clear is Ed Miliband. So I give him a chance today to confirm that if we have an anti-Tory majority, then we will band together to keep David Cameron out of Downing Street. I'm making that clear. I don't see why Ed Miliband won't.
A Tory government, though, would be helpful to the SNP, though, wouldn't it, in terms of forwarding your agenda for a second referendum?
No, Tory governments damage Scotland. That's why, since the age of 16, I've been in politics, motivated to get into politics by my disgust at the Margaret Thatcher government to get the Tories out of Scotland. The Scottish people reject Tories in general election after general election. So I'll continue to campaign against Tory government, and I'll also want to have answers to how such a smear against me finds its way into the Daily Telegraph.
Is that how you describe a smear?
First Minister, I can just drag you around to get our camera angle. You seem to be suggesting that somebody somewhere has made this up. Who do you think that is?
Well, look, I don't know. That's why I'm asking Sir Jeremy Haywood to look into this. What I do know is that two people had a conversation, me and the French ambassador, and both of us say these comments weren't made. So, that, in my view, should be an end of that side of this story. But the bigger issue in this story is how such a memo came to be written, containing this inaccuracy, and then, perhaps most importantly, how this memo got into the hands of the Daily Telegraph. Now, those are the questions that I think demand answers, and that's why I've written to Sir Jeremy Haywood asking for an inquiry.
We're here at a Scrap Trident rally, many SNP supporters, many saying that this is an attempt by the establishment to derail the SNP campaign at a time when you personally were riding high. Do you see it that way?
Well, I do think there's some big questions that need to be answered here. This general election, and I made this clear in the leaders' debate the other night, is a chance to change the Westminster system so that it better serves people, not just in Scotland but across the UK. Perhaps what we're seeing this morning is some sign of panic at the heart of the Westminster establishment at the prospect of that system being shaken up. But I'll continue to campaign for Scotland's voice in Westminster to be heard loudly and clearly, and for more progressive politics right across the Westminster system.
Is Ed Miliband prime ministerial?
That's a matter for people to decide. I've made very clear
What do you think?
I don't want a Tory government. I've made clear that while I don't want a coalition with the Labour Party, I'd be willing to work with Ed Miliband to keep the Tories out of government. It's Ed Miliband that hasn't yet answered the question, would he be prepared to work with me to lock David Cameron out of Downing Street? So I'll make that challenge again today to Ed Miliband. I'll work and vote with you to lock David Cameron out of Downing Street if we have the combined numbers to do so. Will you today give that same commitment?
And finally, First Minister, because you have a speech to go to, are you damaged by this story?
Absolutely not. I think this probably underlines the strength of the SNP and the threat that the SNP poses to the cosy consensus at Westminster. If the SNP wasn't riding high in the I guess we wouldn't be having this conversation. But I come back to the basics here, which I think people watching this will think are the most important facts. Two people had a conversation and they both say that this didn't happen. So that part of the story has been answered. The part of the story that's not been answered is how this memo came to be written, how it came to contain such an inaccuracy, and how it found its way into the hands of the Daily Telegraph. Those are the questions that now need to be answered.
Nicola, just finally, you're describing this as panic on the behalf of the other parties and a smear.
Well, clearly this is an attempt to damage the SNP. It won't be successful, but I repeat again, in terms of the Daily Telegraph's allegation, the two people that had this conversation say it's not true. So that part of the story seems to me to be pretty comprehensively dealt with. The questions that have yet to be answered are why this memo with this inaccuracy came to be written.
Do you think it's panic on the behalf of the other parties?
Yeah, I think the Westminster establishment is clearly panicking. I made the case in the leaders' debate on Thursday night that this election was an opportunity to change the Westminster system, for people to say to Westminster, your priorities are wrong and the people want to rewrite those priorities. I'm about to address a rally opposing the renewal of Trident, a rally full of people who say that the Westminster priority to spend £100 billion in new nuclear weapons is the wrong priority. So perhaps the Westminster establishment is beginning to panic, because there are ordinary people, not just in Scotland, but the length and breadth of the UK, who think Westminster's out of touch and needs to be changed, and that's the message I'll continue to argue in this campaign.
Thank you.
Okay.